All right, I thought I would create a little video that gives you a quick overview of how the K22 system works, with the idea being that you could see if this is something that works for you. I would supply the rule set and the system of play, and I could use somebody who would like to provide official maps for the system, as well as pieces and the dice, although a single 1d10 will suffice. All right, let's take a look at how the system works. You see these discs over here? This is something that I implemented that is very popular with the players. They are allowed a random assignment, or the umpire just assigns them a point total. 25 if you want to go small, or 30 for small, 40, 50 for kind of bigger units. But somewhere in between there, they do a draw, and they get to build their unit, their brigade, based on the points that they draw. And the brigade, each block has a cost in points. So let's say I have 30 points just for the sake of argument, okay? And I want to buy some infantry battalions. So let's see here. Let's just grab a couple infantry battalions, and we're just going to hit copy there. And let's take a look here at the menu and how it goes. Okay, so with my 30 points, I want 10 points for regular infantry. That gets me 2 blocks because 10 points gets you 2. They're purchased by the battalion and come with 2 blocks, each representing a half battalion of 450 men. All right, so I've got that. That's 10 points. I'm going to go ahead and spend another 10 points for a second battalion. And maybe I want to, say, hey, it's after 1808, or, whatever. I want to have skirmish companies inside my battalions, in which case I will do a copy here, and I will spend an extra point each to get a skirmish block, which is a pretty good value. Then I have spent 10, 20, 21, 22 points, which leaves me with 8 points. Let's say now I want some artillery. I can either get a 6-pound or a 12-pound foot artillery. Let's get a 12-pound foot, because since I have 8 points and I can't spend the difference, there's no saving the difference. So I'm going to get a 12-pound foot artillery. Now, the bonus that 12-pound foot artillery gets is they have +1 die roll modifier when firing the unopposed artillery die, and we'll talk about what that is. All right, I still have a couple points left over, but there's nothing that I can buy. Note that because I chose to run an infantry battalion, I cannot buy anything in the cavalry menu. I can either run an infantry battalion with foot artillery, or I can run a cavalry battalion with horse artillery, but I cannot run both. Okay? Actually, I should say brigade to be more precise rather than battalions, since I have here 2 infantry battalions. All right, typically I like to label these. I like to, just to be clear, we have scripted pieces in our official module. It's the official K22 module that I've been using for playtesting and development. I'm not going to bother with it here for right now. But let's say this is my battalion, and I'm gonna, have them marching around, and they're gonna come into the battle. I'm not gonna really show you much of the movement, but the movement rules are pretty simple. Basically, we have this grid overlaid on the map, which is at 400 paces. The units move 400 paces in a 5-minute turn. The K22 system moves in 5-minute increments. And if they are in column on a road on flat terrain, they get 400 paces of movement. For each complication to movement, however, let's say they're going uphill, you reduce that movement by 25%. They always get a minimum of 100 paces, but otherwise you diminish that movement allowance of 400 paces per 5 minutes for each complication. So going uphill is a complication, being in formation is a complication, being off-road is a complication. So if they were to go uphill in formation cross-country, they would actually only move 100 paces in under those conditions. All right, These skirmish blocks here are actually just reminders more than anything, but I like to put them out here in front to indicate that yes, we have skirmishers out, and here is an artillery block. Okay, let's create an opposition force real quick, and we will go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so when you build this army or your battalion or whatever, you have the option of making your blocks either militia or elite, and that affects the combat value. Let's say these are 4 regular infantry blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, let's make them elite just for the fun of it. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means if they're elite, they have a combat value, which is equal to the number of points you spent to build them. So their combat value is 6, 12, 18, 24 is their combat value. Over here, I've got infantry combat value 5, 10, 15, 20. You don't count combat value for artillery or the skirmish blocks, just the regular half battalion blocks. So I've got 24 versus 20 combat value. Now, when they meet and they are going to come within 400 paces to be within range, actually like about 300 paces, they're in range. We pull a die. Now I have a variety of dice created. All of the dice for the module are going to be standardized to D10s. I originally was using D8s. I found that I had too many outliers in the results when rolling D8s, so I just said, let's just do D10s. Here we have 2 infantry dice that we could possibly roll. One is infantry versus infantry, and one is the advantage die. So even combat value here is what we roll when the 2 sides are within 1 point combat value of each other, or they have the same combat value. This die has even odds. This die over here, however, does not have even odds, and it's rolled in a case where one side has 2 combat value or greater. In that case, the French or the blue side has greater combat value. They are at combat value of 24 versus combat value of 20. So because they are at plus 2, greater than 2 combat value, they get to roll this die against the red. Now you only roll 1 die. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the other thing you do is you determine what side is superior and what side is inferior. So the side with the greater combat value is superior. So let's say we have a bunch of blocks around here. We have other forces on the map, and they're all kind of doing Kriegsspiel things. Okay, I'll draw some lines up here to simulate. Oh, look, there's a combat here, and there's troops doing things over here, and whatever. And we're not going to worry about that, right? But I want to demonstrate something to you. The way the K22 system works is it's designed to play very quickly. In normal games, each block throws a die at the other block. So you'd be rolling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe even 10, 11 blocks or dice at each other. And that is way too much to do. Instead, in the K22 system, what we do is we group the combats. So here is one combat, here is another combat, and here is another one. And then we're going to roll only 1 die, and that 1 die is going to resolve the entire combat, which is actually quite historic because a lot of times the average Napoleonic battle, the combats were actually quite short, 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then that was just about it. One side or the other would typically retreat or move off or do something. They would not sit there and stay engaged for long periods of time unless they had lines of reinforcements behind them that could be rotated in. So this mechanic also forces historic gameplay because if the player wants to have some resiliency in combat, they don't want their line to just shatter on contact, then they're going to have reserves which you can then freely rotate into the line so that you can maintain your line under enemy attack. But in any case, there's no reserves here today. We just have this combat. So we're going to go ahead and roll the die. But before we roll the die, we also have to calculate the die roll modifiers. So right now, 24 to 20, and that means we roll the superior die, the advantage die, and blue is the superior side. Now there's a couple modifiers. One of the modifiers is the red has skirmish blocks, whereas blue did not pay for skirmishers. As a result, that's a -1 and a -2 DRM. In addition, red has artillery that will be firing in support of their infantry, so that is another DRM. And so because red is the inferior side, the DRMs are negative. We have 1, 2, 3 negative DRMs. So now we roll the die. And let me actually roll it. And then we apply the result. So here we got a result of 2, but we subtract 3 DRMs. So you can't go any lower than 1. So what that has done in this case is, although the superior force is superior, they have been routed by the skirmishers and artillery and combined firepower of this regular infantry formation. They are routed, so that's one of the 3 possible loss results that occur in the game. So the first result is you can fall back, and when a unit falls back, they retreat 200 paces, but they remain in good order. They don't take any disruption, they don't take any losses, they just kind of fall back. They're like, man, it's a little too warm up there, let's step back a little bit and kind of get a better footing. That's not the result, of course. The result here is going to be routed, but just to show you, this is the fall back result. Another result they could have is retreat. Retreat is you fall back 400 paces and you take disruption. And a disruption marker is applied to the blocks, and what that means is that they're going to lose 1 point of combat value. What is disruption? Disruption is anything bad that ruins or diminishes the cohesion of the unit. So they could be low on ammo, an officer could have been killed, they could have suffered some significant casualties, not enough to force them to turn around and run away, but there's something that's going on. Their cohesion is diminished, which decreases their combat effectiveness, and in this case that's measured in combat value. So that's what would happen if they were forced to retreat. If they are routed, however, instead of backing up 400 paces, they retreat 800 paces because they are running from the battle. They are running from the combat. And their state is reduced to a broken state, and one of the units takes a loss. Let's see here. I think that is on the scripted piece. You know what? I have to unbreak them. And then I take this piece here. Which unit suffers the loss is up to you as the umpire, but in the whole group you apply 1 loss. So the units, they fall back. I don't have to apply that broken modifier or state to them unless I want to be cute. It's enough to put this on the unit and say, hey, they've retreated. Okay. I can also change these to broken however I want to indicate it, which I actually like to do because I want people to know. Actually, we have a routed state on here, that these guys are out of action for a little while. So let me just tweak that. Okay. All right, let's talk about some other scenarios that are typical in how it works. One is the artillery. If the artillery is firing on these units and nothing can shoot back, then the artillery will roll what's called the unopposed arty die, which I don't have in a D10. I have it as a D8, but it's this black one. And basically, it inflicts a list on the it inflicts losses on the target unit, but not the artillery. In this case, they're firing and they got no effect. The way this whole thing works, there's this whole little rubric for, depending on range, how you roll this and modify it and so on. It's actually quite simple. Likewise, this is the counter battery die. I actually have a D10 for it, so let's dump the D8. Here's the D10. I actually wanted to discourage counter battery fire because correctly, as per doctrine, you should be firing on the enemy maneuver element. Therefore, most of your counter battery fire results are actually going to be misses. However, you can get hits on 8, 9, 10, and you can even rout the enemy battery on the roll of a 10. And again, all die rolls can be modified one way or another depending on whatever other circumstances apply, such as terrain or other things like that. Okay? Cavalry. We model 4 basic types of cavalry: Hussar, Dragoon, Lancer, Cuirassier. I won't get into the nature of them, but they do interact in a certain way, and I may tweak these rules further. But here is a simple matrix. So if Cuirassier fights Cuirassier, I roll 1 die, and that's it. And the die I'm rolling is the Cav versus Cav die, and that's, I believe, this yellow die here. No, it's this one here. It's this kind of tan or whatever color die it is. And this is the Cav v Cav die. So when Cuirassier fights Cuirassier, 2 cavalry of the same type, in this case C versus C. Oop, I need to lock this so it doesn't move. Okay, there we go. When I roll this, you just apply the result. Target cavalry unit falls back, so on and so forth. And that's the way you do it. If you're doing dragoons, you roll the dragoon die. Otherwise, lancers, hussars, you roll the cav versus cav die, and there are some modifiers and so on. Very simple, actually. Once I show it to you, you'll be like, oh, okay, that's pretty easy, pretty simple. We also have avatar tokens for the um, various commanders, because those matter, as well as dispatch rider tokens to indicate, hey, here's a dispatch that's going out. I do have a lot of other pieces on here. They are just part of the development and testing process. In the final release of this module, those will be cleaned up. Anyway, you see how this works. The idea is a game can be played with 2 or 3 players in about 2 to 4 hours time, which is pretty remarkable for any Kriegsspiel. And the what was I going to say about that? 2 to 4 hours time. And yeah, you can also play 2 players by having both sides write down their orders, and then they resolve the orders simultaneously. A third player, you would have one of them act as the umpire, is all. So anyway, I've got a much more substantial rules book already written and pretty much done. But you know, we have the combat resolution procedure. This is really the cheat sheet, and it basically tells you the movement rates and all of that. So there you have it. So that's how the system works. And it would be nice to combine the rules with maps and pieces. So there you have it. All right, thanks.